Now tell me if this happened to you. It's March 2020 and the lockdown is just beginning. You have finally found the time to get back to your science fiction and crime thriller novels and your smutty fiction. It's all waiting for you on your bookshelf because now you have this 24-hour open window of just immersing yourself in this world. But it just didn't happen. Yeah. Me too. Hello friends, my name is Nader Sayed and I am a writer and poet from Toronto, Ontario. And today I'm going to try and cure a worldwide epidemic. Not that one. Today we're going to try to get you into reading. So in 2020, I had a goal of reading a book a week, especially when I had, for the first time ever, the whole 24 hours to myself. I thought I'd crush it, but that didn't happen at all. So the first thing we need to understand is why. Steven Pressfield talks about a force that stops you from doing what you want as resistance. Whatever the friction is between you and your books, that's resistance. And my number one resistance was my phone. After 8 hours of on-screen time, my brain just doesn't have the stamina to focus on long-form reading, especially with the rise of apps like TikTok, which are cultivated to kill your attention span. Reading was just not going to happen. So here's my first advice for people trying to get back into reading. Read shorter books. There's absolutely no need to pick up Infinite Jest or try to reread the Lord of the Rings series as a binge read if you haven't read in a very, very long time. You absolutely will not succeed. Now think of your reading skills as a muscle. When you go back into the gym, you can't just start lifting heavy weights, the bench presses you used to do when you were gymming. You can't start with those kind of heavy weights. You have to start lighter. You have to have smaller reps. You have to have more recovery time. That same principle applies to your reading. You want to go for shorter books. You want to go for easier books. You want to go for more entertaining books. You just can't dive into the thick Lolita type dead Russian authors. That's not going to work. Of Mice and Men, The Great Gatsby, the first Dark Towers book, the first Harry Potter book. These are great 180 to 220 page books where you want to navigate. Also, short stories. Do not underestimate short stories. Short stories have a great power of pulling you back into the narrative structure that your brain is so used to and that it hasn't gotten in a while. My recommendations: Ernest Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Bukowski, Margaret Atwood. Stephen King has a great short stories collection as well. Those, you cannot go wrong with those. My next advice is to invest in an e-reader. Now, the Kindle is one of my best purchases that I've ever made. Where your cell phone should be as far away from your bed as possible, your Kindle should be as close to your bed as possible. You can add as many books as you want, and this goes back to my tips of reading smaller books. The little percentage marker at the bottom left of the screen really helps push the motivation and the drive for you to finish that, because you see how quickly it goes up when you're reading shorter books, and that just helps your brain kick back into the dopamine rhythm that it needs for long-form reading. Okay, so what is the best time to read? For me, personally, there's two best times to read. One is right before I go to sleep, when I'm detached with the normal world and I'm sort of shutting down. That's a great time for me to read fiction. I read a lot of fantasy and crime thrillers and sometimes horror if it's October, but otherwise I try to really dive deep into the thick fantasy section of my bookshelf to sort of soak up the narrative storytelling that I'm so vehemently missing throughout the day. And in the morning, I try to read more nonfiction stuff with problem solving, stuff with big ideas to get my brain cells running so that I can think about ideas and I can think about problems and how to solve them. There's a great YouTube video by Max Joseph, a filmmaker and documentarian, called How to Read More Books in the Golden Age of Content. And it really goes deep into the psychology of why we read and how we can continue to do so. In that video, there's a great tip on just reading 30 minutes a day.
At 30 minutes a day only, you can read this and War and Peace and Moby Dick and 3 other books.
And let's not forget audiobooks. Now, last year alone, I finished 5 books just on audiobooks, and audiobooks do count. It's just an easy and convenient way for you to consume books. Now, for me, I can't listen to audiobooks that have fiction narratives to it. For some reason, it just doesn't work for me. But nonfiction is a really good way for me to consume audiobooks, especially if the book is narrated in the voice of the author. Then it just feels like I'm listening to the guy talk one-on-one, or the girl, and it's an all-encompassing feeling, and it counts towards my reading goals, and you can tick that book off. And finally, this is a big one: say no to your phone. That means when you're planning on reading, you and your phone should not be at the same sea level, which means if you're reading downstairs, you should want to put your phone upstairs on charging so you can have an uninterrupted session of reading. If you're upstairs, put your phone downstairs, put it out of the room, put it somewhere where you can't reach it or walk to it in a matter of 5 to 10 steps. That really, really, really helps. When I tell you that the distraction of the phone is the single source that's most likely killing your reading drive, and I mean it, then it is. Keep your phone away when you're reading, and after the first 3 to 5 minutes of you starting to read, you forget that you have a phone around you, and that's when the best reading happens. That's when the vivid pictures in your mind are as clear as possible, and you totally are engrossed and encompassed by whatever you're reading. Once you get into the motion of reading, this exercise will come a lot easier to you. Anyways, guys, that's all from me. I hope you found some value from whatever I said today. All of these tips help me immensely get back into reading. Currently, I'm reading the Stormlight Archive books by Brandon Sanderson. I just started The Way of Kings. I'm looking at my bookshelf. I'm also reading Murakami, and on my Kindle, I'm reading Why We Sleep. So I'm juggling through a few different books, but these tricks help. And as my occupation as a writer, reading is the number one thing that I can do to help write better. If you'd like to see more content like this, consider contributing to my Patreon. I also have a newsletter down there where I write about writing, and I share short stories and personal essays about writing and life. This week, I think I'm talking about Snow Patrol and how I met Gary Lightbody, so that's going to be interesting. And if you hate visuals at all, which is surprising that you're still on this video, consider listening to my podcast with my brother called Vaguely Familiar, where we talk about movies, music, cricket, and much, much more. We talk to interesting guests. Ali Abdal was one of the guests that was on our podcast. So you guys want to check that out. We're available on all streaming platforms. If any of that interests you, the links are down below. Anyways, I hope you guys get back into your reading habits. That's all from me today. See you guys in the next video. Nazar out.